Hello, folks. Welcome to Between Awesome and Disaster. This is your host, Will Carey. I appreciate you tuning in. I hope you are doing well, staying safe, taking care of those closest to you. I am coming off of a very, very busy week at the old office, so I'm feeling pretty good today. As I call this Lazy Sandwich Sunday, which is where my wife and I order giant sandwiches from one of my favorite places to get sandwiches in New York, Compton's, and watch TV, which sometimes you need. I know and we're going to extol the virtues of getting out there and seeing the world today, especially as I guess I didn't quite realize, because I don't interact too much with the outside world during the week, save for my new habit of bicycle riding in the afternoon. I'm trying to get a little bit more activity in my life. But it seems more and more as if COVID is starting to wane, which is really great to see. I remain cautiously optimistic until somebody says, until there's a 100% cure. I still don't love the idea that we're just it's gonna incorporate into our day and be like the flu. That's something I still need to come to terms with. But we're talking about going out and having some experiences today. My guest on the show today is my delightful, and as many of you know from her previous appearance on the show and from our other podcast, the Hallmark After Show podcast, my wife Cheslea Connor is back on the show today, and we're specifically talking about not only the times that we live in and the era that as elder millennials, we remember the before times, and we've also seen the growth of technology in all of its different iterations, to the point where, like, the comparatively crappy camera technology that I was like selling to people when I worked in retail is now considered vintage to the generation coming after me. So we're going to talk about that, and we're also going to talk a lot about kind of the definitive travel moments that my wife's had in her life, and I've been lucky enough to share with her. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you are a adventurous, travel-seeking kind of person, if you aren't, I hope this inspires some people. And if you enjoyed this and want to listen to any of the other episodes of this podcast, you can find links at awesomedisaster.com, as well as links to everything related to me, all my social media. Everything I do is at awesomedisaster.com. You can feel free to send me a message as well. I have a contact form there as well. So thank you all for being here, and let's talk to my wife, Cheslea Connor. And not just because she's my wife, I'm her husband. So let's talk to Cheslea.
How do we start this?
Is
there singing?
No, there's no. I don't do any singing. I just kind of go right into the conversation.
That's bananas.
Yeah,
there should be singing.
I don't do. I talk to lots of musicians on this, but I don't do tons of singing on the actual podcast.
Huh. Okay.
Yeah.
Are we recording? Okay.
Yeah.
We're recording now. This is the
it.
podcast. Oh, okay.
Hi,
everybody.
This is the podcast.
I'm gonna self-introduce myself. My name is Cheslea Connor. I am married to your host, William Carey. I am not your co-host for this episode, but Will asked me to join him for this podcast because I've tormented him all day with 90 Day Fiancé the other way. So now it's my turn in the hot seat.
Yes, exactly.
Also, I'm the best guest he's ever had on the show.
Oh, quality. Of the hundreds of guests I've had on the show, the witty repartee that we do, dear, is just bar none. Like the favorite part. The fans, they clamor for it.
Do you want to better introduce me than I introduced myself? Or was that cool?
No, I do intros on Between Awesome and Disaster, as opposed to just going into our other show.
So I'll get self-introduced later. Interesting. That's very meta. Okay, sorry, listeners.
Yeah.
I'm Cheslea.
Yeah. Well, because I do that whole welcome to Between Awesome and Disaster.
That's usually the part where I'm asleep for the night, and you're like, I have to do this thing for the podcast, and I'm like, bye, see you tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. Like all of the little bits of post-production, which I imagine you know about. It's like, I know your background is in like TV production, but I have a feeling that this would translate
And
seamlessly.
theatrical production, don't forget.
And theatrical production. I actually read I listened to a very interesting story on This American Life because Phantom of the Opera is
It's
closing on
yeah.
Broadway.
It's exciting.
And they did a really interesting story on the Pit musicians who have been in the show sometimes since the very beginning.
Yeah, they've had like a 30+ year job.
Yeah, which is very rare for musicians in New York City.
And they're like, oh crap, now what do we do?
Well, there's a little bit of that, and one of them built like an entire like robot orchestra.
Wow.
As like his side project from when he's not playing Phantom, because there's always this idea of like musicals need musicians, but if you are a musician and you're playing music that's written for you, that's a different form of creativity from like writing music or composing something of your own. And there's this sort of like they talk about like all the little like tiny nuances of like, oh well, this oboe player doesn't get along with this bassoon player.
For sure. Welcome to theater. Nobody likes anybody actually until you send them to a cast party.
Yeah, that's where it all kind of comes down the wash. I just love that. I found it so interesting because there's like people that will have paid good money for tickets to that show.
Sure.
And then like in between songs, they're just the Pit's just like reading a book or doing like the crossword or Sudoku.
Totally.
And then I mean, there's a little bit of like kind of removing the magic of it.
I'm sorry. That's why they put that net over it so you can't see it so good.
Exactly. Well, and I'm also thinking about this
also,
sort
so
of
things don't murder them, but sure.
Yeah.
Both reasons. For
well,
sure.
because there's like a crash that happens in Phantom. I've never seen it, so
Me
I
neither.
don't know.
Should we go? Is it closed already?
I don't think it's closed yet. We could try. We could see what's out there.
I don't even know the songs.
I just know there's one song that kind of goes like, dun it. It's like a ascending and descending chromatic scale, and it's very similar.
Wow, nerd.
To a Pink Floyd song.
Huh. Okay.
So there's like, he's Andrew Lloyd Webber's.
So it's not Angelica, Cat, Angelica. No, that's the wrong one. Okay.
No, that's a different Andrew Lloyd Webber musical. I would love to.
Cats.
While we're on this riff, I would love to. I would gladly dive into Cats because one of the most fun times I've ever seen a bad movie in a theater was going and seeing
that was pretty
Cats.
Terrible. But what are we talking about? Because I don't think it's Andrew Lloyd Webber is the theme of this podcast. Is last I checked.
Well, this is your second appearance on the show, so I
don't know the structure. I'm a terrible. I'm trying to drive as co-host because I used to be the co-host on our other podcast. Well, I still am the host.
Yeah. Well, our other podcast is seasonal. You know.
Yeah, it's just for the holidays.
Yeah. Although we have a bunch of extra hallmarks, we could do a July.
I know Christmas
July
reboot.
reboot.
We might do that.
Yeah.
It's not a bad idea. Something to do in the air conditioning.
Yeah, exactly.
Like turn it up, turn it down to like 40 degrees.
Yeah, like because like New Yorkers know this, but maybe people who listen from outside don't. Temperature in New York apartments fluctuates wildly, and you have very little control over it.
No,
most of the time.
It's hot 365 days of the year.
Yes.
Because it's either hot in winter because we have steam heating, or it's hot in summer because it's hot outside. Is this an explicit podcast? Can I use F-bombs here?
Fuck yeah.
Great. Amazing. Explicit.
Mm-hmm.
Hide your children and your wives.
Because the wives can't handle
no, that was a throwback reference to a YouTube from a long time.
Hide your kids, hide your wife. Yeah, I know it.
That was throwback.
Mm-hmm.
But in any event, it's always hot until... I'm sorry. So I should say 362 days of the year it's hot. There are 3 days a year where it's freezing and you might die in your apartment.
Yeah.
It's usually this first temperature drop in like November, December when like your landlord like doesn't agree that it's going to get like
that winter hasn't started yet, so we don't want to turn the heat on yet.
You can just tough it out for another day. And then there's what we call second winter, which usually comes in March. Like today was second winter. And, you have like, you basically have, another drop like that. And the landlord's like, it's not hot yet. Or it's going to be hot forever now. The groundhog said so. And they turn off the heat. And then they're like, oh, crap. Let's turn it back on. Like it happens 3 times throughout the year. It's cold in this apartment. All the other times it's hot. endlessly hot. I'm living in like shorts and a t-shirt in my apartment no matter what time of year it is.
Yes. Yeah. Terminally, like I'm terminally dressed like I'm on my way to basketball practice.
And conversely, what's really frustrating is my office is always cold. It's cold
Mhm.
in the winter. It's cold in the summer. It's just never hot. It's never warm. And so I dress, I don't know, kind of like evergreen all year round. Like my mom used to have seasons to her office wardrobe. Like I don't have that. I should wear my summer clothes in the winter and my winter clothes in the summer. Like there's no winning. There's no winning.
Yeah, and like having to, I used to keep an office hoodie because it was always very cold.
I have multiple office hoodies now. What I do is I part of my job is to like get the like clothing and like GAC, I call it, like the marketing stuff if you lived in a marketing universe. And they always send me samples of stuff that are always like irregular cut or whatever. Like we'd never give them out, right? And I can't return them because once they have our logo or our wrong logo in some cases on them. So then sometimes I'm just walking around the office with like the wrong logo for the union and people are just like, what's that? I'm like, I'm cold. Is what that is.
Yeah, it's a throwback. You could refer to it as a throwback.
Yeah, like our union's colors are definitely like gold and red, but really red and black and gold like sometimes when we're feeling fancy, right? But like every once in a while I'll get like some sample back that's like purple or blue or green, like totally wrong.
Were they always gold and red, or did they have another color at some point in?
So gold is
history?
more recent. We've always been red.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and the gold it has to do with like mergers and acquisitions. That sounds terrible, but it has to do with like mergers and affiliations, and so we now have like a gold introduced.
Right, it's sort of like as you introduce, as you combine Voltron style, like different remnants of
but like
each group.
99% of the time we're red. Although so every 4 years, this is really going into detail, too much work, but every 4 years we like set the tone for our progress forward. And as part of that, it includes the branding. And I, without actually talking to anybody, like decided that would set the branding now for the next like 4 years. Like, and this last set of branding was like a kaleidoscope of colors. And so like I've just made decisions now that not everything has to be red, and no one said anything to me about it yet. Although if anyone's listening to this podcast, you're going to totally say something to me about it. And so I've just been enjoying the kaleidoscope, waiting for the shoe to drop.
Sure. Yeah, I there's so many things, and I've never said this on the podcast, but I love this story of I held your work phone for you for some reason for like
I asked you to film me for
3 minutes. Yeah. I was filming, doing some filming for you, and like I had to hold your work phone, and the little I had to keep clearing away the notifications.
Yeah, you had to put it in airplane mode.
Yeah, because it just. It's like having a personal like massager, but it does the opposite of reduce
That's why
stress.
my hands are so smooth.
Like it just never stops.
And my face.
Have you ever had I call it a phantom vibration?
Should probably put it in airplane mode now. Have I?
I mean,
all the time. I mean, do you see like my hand is permanently fused to my phone? Like it's an appendage, you know? And like this idea that like I really struggle with letting go of the phone. I totally have phantom vibrations, totally hear phantom dings, although my phone is constantly in silence. I don't even know how that would happen, but occasionally I knock the button, right?
Sure, yeah.
But yeah, like we were watching a TV show that I actually wanted to pay attention to the other day, and I like literally walked and put my phone in another room just so that I would, and I kept, instead of phantom vibrations, like I kept like phantom reaching, you know, for the phone.
Yeah.
So it's bad.
Yeah,
I have a problem.
Like in the last,
Can I go to iPhone Users Anonymous?
Well, it's interesting you bring that up because I know that comedian Aziz Ansari on his last Netflix special was talking. He brought that he went back to having a flip phone. The
users are doing that. The Gen Zers, they're all about our old technology, flip phones, digital cameras. It's awesome.
Yeah, I find that really
waiting for the floppy disk to come back. I'm ready for that one.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. One of my favorite bands are releasing an album of theirs on floppy disks.
Shut up! How are you going to hear it?
I think it's mostly going to be like a conversation piece. Like, here's my Less Than Jake album on floppy disk.
On a floppy disk, you can't even fit like one. I think you fit 3 songs.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be a set. It's going to be like a box set, but it's going to be.
I used to carry around a box of floppy disks and CDRs when we were doing that for a minute, and then I mean, I remember when the USB drive popped into my world, and I was like, revelation. And it was like $500 for 1 gigabyte. Now I could get like 57 terabytes for $500. I don't even know how much it costs. But
Exactly.
I pay Google $12 a month for 3 terabytes. So
same. I've played shows with bands which have their albums on those discs.
really,
Yeah. That's like a way of distributing them. MC Lars, friend of the show, has like his entire discography you can get on the USB drive. Last time I saw him live.
And USB is now going away. Like that was a moment I thought would never happen. I thought the USB was here to stay, and now it's being replaced with USB-C, which I guess is still USB, but it's much faster and smaller and whatever. But like, I really thought USB came into vogue when I was in high school, so like in the early 2000s, and like it made it to 2023. So like Mazel Tov USB on like making it a quarter century, but like it's getting no one's talking about it. I think this should be in the news. Like any reporters listening to this who I deal with on a daily basis, I would love to see an article about like, how does USB feel? How are we going to change? Like as a society, think about it. You now have wall outlets that have USBs baked into them. That's why I'm always afraid of like putting too new technology into my home, because like in 5 years it's going to change wildly.
But then it'll become vintage again. Like I remember understanding how like film still cameras like that were black and white or shot or Bolexes. I understand that there's a certain kind of artistic aesthetic
French
that you can get. Exactly. You can do the like sort of
That's
like
not
French
true for USB though. I think
Or-
USB is going to die like CDRs.
or point and shoot digital cameras from like
That's
from
just
2005
stupid. I'm sorry,
2006.
Gen Zers, but that's like, come on. You can take beautiful photos with an iPhone or any camera phone now. I'm like a photo nerd. People don't know this about me, but I love taking beautiful photos. It's like a passion project of mine. I've never gone to school for it. I've never like sat in a dark room. I don't understand the history of photography, but like I am obsessed with documenting my life in photo in a way that people like, not me as the subject, but like the things
Your
I'm experiencing. Yeah, and people don't know this, and they just sit. I have over like 100,000 photos on my phone. It's insane.
That's really, I didn't know that. Like I know you have an eye for composition, and I know you actually have an award-winning photo that's hanging in our living room. I would be. That's very cool. You could probably throw up like a website or Flickr. I mean, I know we do Instagram. I know we do Instagram nowadays, but just saying that could be a cool.
Yeah, I mean they're not fancy. They're not like
yours.
They're not like Pete Souza photos. Let's be honest. You know, they're not like.
How many Pete Souzas are there? Who was the White House photographer under Obama and Reagan?
Yeah. Well, he wasn't like the head photographer under Reagan, but he was a photographer under Reagan. He was Obama's head guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he was the one who like famously kept clapping back the Trump administration in photos on Instagram. It was great. I love him as a human.
Yeah, he's witty, and he's got, again, my biggest things, like when I look at photographs, I just maybe because I think of it from like a film kind of point of view, I think of like the composition of the shot and like the dividing of the photos.
Yeah, I think like I travel a lot in my life, and I've experienced a lot in my life, and I'm pretty sure my parents have lost my baby album and most of my childhood photos, and like their move and refurbishing of their home, reconstruction of their home. What do you call it? Renovation, yeah. And so that's a little sad for me because I don't have like very many. I have a handful of like childhood photos around, but you know, I think it tells like a family history. And like when you look at my dad's like college or high school graduation photo compared to like my brother's, compared to his like son who's not yet in high school, like it's scary. They look identical. It's kind of crazy. And so like you can track like your past, present, and future, but also like the world. And like I don't know if I'll ever go to the Taj Mahal again in my lifetime. Maybe. I don't need to. I've been there. I saw it. It's awesome. Took photos, you know. But like I saw photos of like my grandmother in like Bermuda shorts in like Egypt in 1970, like at a time when going to Egypt was a big deal. It might have been before that, probably just before the coups and stuff. So like maybe it was the 60s, but like, you know, you go there and then these places are exactly the same, and it's insane to me. Like, you know, and I love like my favorite thing on the internet is when people like do the how it started, how it's going, if it's the same photo pose, and like they did it as children and now they're adults. Like, I love that. I'm here for that clickbait.
Yeah, I've seen lots of like, recreating our family photo from like 20 years ago.
Yes.
Things. Well, you bring up travel, and that's something I wanted to talk a bit about today.
I thought you wanted to talk about QVC today.
Well,
we're going to talk all about QVC. 60 minutes on QVC. I have lots of opinions about QVC and HSN. QVC, HSN.
Well, I definitely
Not
want to get to that, but I definitely want to. But I like, as much as television shopping has become a part of our
it's
routine.
A travel experience for me. It's a trip.
Well, because for the longest time because you're kind of grounded for for a number of years.
The
most
world
recently.
was Will,
yeah.
not just me. Like the world.
Well, no, I know, but I'm talking about.
I got big plans.
I'm talking about you specifically because, when I met you, I had been out of the country once, and I had been on a plane twice.
Would you like to tell us about it again?
No.
Okay. Sorry, it's Will's favorite story. My favorite thing to tell Will is like I'm going somewhere and he's like, I've never been there. And I'm like, I know.
Well,
I know.
Well, I mean, because it would be pretty odd if I just started like booking solo trips for myself to like have some different experiences.
I did that. I went to Colombia without you. It was okay.
I know, but it was like in the middle of doing something. I'd always had this idea of like, maybe I'll start touring, or I'll have some sort of gig that requires me to travel a bit.
Yeah.
Oh no, there's no expiration date on that for me, to be perfectly
80 years
honest.
old. I finally made it to Asheville. It's still here. It's not what they said it was in the 20s.
Am I going to get more Jewish
yes, you do.
As I grow older?
Yes, as you spend more time with your very Jewish wife, yes,
Mm-hmm.
you become more Jewish.
Right. So do you have a specific trip that you remember that gave you sort of that travel bug? Because you strike me as someone who's always been very curious, because there's just a lot of people in my life that I've come to learn recently are just not very curious people. And I definitely know a lot of people, especially from my hometown, that talk like they're foreign policy experts who have never left their hometown.
Interesting.
So I want to know if there was a specific trip that kind of like opened your mind to the larger world around you, or if you were always you had that before you started traveling, that sort of curiosity.
I mean, I grew up in a family of travelers, right? Like that's how I would describe it. My grandmother, who lived in a different time, literally in so many
Quite
ways.
literally, yes.
I won't get into it, but like she lived in a totally different era, and my great grandmother did as well. And they saw the world. They saw the world at periods of time in the world that were not safe for travel in certain places, where countries, the idea of travel, like they took boats, like ships to get there. And
like,
so I
like
grew
ocean
up,
liners?
Yeah. Like ocean liners. Like I've heard stories of my great grandmother like taking, I'm sure it wasn't like the Queen Mary or whatever, but like taking fancy, not cruises, I don't know if they'd call them that, but like ships, voyages to Europe and things like that lasted months on end, and like felt very like Hemingway-esque era maybe. But even as a little child, my parents took us places, not just in the US, but outside. But, my grandmother would like have just returned from Africa and have like bags and bags and bags. Like she was like, I don't know, checking into like the Ritz-Carlton or something. And she'd come and stay with us for like 2 or 3 days on her way back home from Africa, because we live in New York City. And she'd come into a major airport with all of her worldly possessions that she had just grasped. And we were little, and she had gifts for us, always gifts for us, and always things that she was then showing us that she was taking home to her home, that I coveted. Like, perfect example, there's this carved wooden hippo is from Africa. I don't remember which country, but I was 7 or 8 years old, and my grandmother had got me this really cool t-shirt. It was a black t-shirt and had a hippo on it in pink, kind of like 90s neon or whatever, and on the back was like the hippo's butt outline. I loved it. Nick and my brother Nick had one. I think it was an elephant. I don't know, he'd be able to tell you, but I very, very vividly remember this hippo t-shirt, and like she had this beautifully carved wooden hippo. It was heavy, and she, I was like, is that for me? Because I was a precocious shithead of a child. And she was
Sure.
like, no, this is going home to my home in Florida. And I would visit it all the time in Florida. And I loved this hippo. And the hippo now lives in our apartment after my grandmother passed away. Just before she passed away, actually, she gifted it to us because she wanted to know it had like made its home in
Sure.
Brooklyn, in New York City. But sorry, that doesn't answer your question about what was the trip. But I think like travel, my mother was constantly traveling to and from Washington, D.C. Like we were a traveling family. We probably went to Florida, like, I don't know, 15 times a year, and went to D.C. and went to lots of places. But we probably started more concretely traveling as a family when I was older. And I think like our biggest like adventure abroad, like multi-country thing, was when we went to Peru and Ecuador and the Galapagos Islands, and it was the weeks before September 11th.
Yes.
And I was young, and we were in Cusco, which is this mountain high, city that, the air quality is very thin, and you have to drink coca tea, which is a derivative of cocaine, to be able to like, acclimate. And I was young.
Really?
Yeah. And my whole family was like exhausted from the thin air. And it's like they were napping or whatever. And I just went out for myself. Lord knows why they let me do this, or if I even asked. So sorry, Mom and Dad, if you're listening and you don't know the story. But I went out into the Cusco main town square, and I like had, I don't know, 15 souls to my name, which is like the equivalent of $3. I had no money with me, but I was like walking around and shopping and whatever. And there were children who were my age who were very not as well off as I was. And
Right.
I think when you're young and you're faced with that, and you sort of you hold a different memory of it, and you hold a different like response to it in a different way. But certainly like that very first time in a foreign country, going out on my own, albeit for maybe 20 to 30 minutes, no one seemed worried. I don't, maybe they said it was fine as long as I stayed in the square. Who knows?
Well, it's pretty public space.
I did not very much speak Spanish, and I was very much a blonde white child. But I think like this like freedom a bit, if you will, of like, holy cow, I'm like 11 years old and I'm like walking around this town was pretty cool. And I'll always remember that trip, because my mother planned this thing, really before the internet was real. And like, she told us we were going to be on like 8 different flights, and I paid attention, and like, and then of course, like one of the planes that only has enough seats for the 4 of us and lands on a mud tarmac. And I thought, holy shit, this is how I die. But we're in the jungle in the middle of nowhere, and there's piranhas and alligators, and like this idea and this notion, it's really hard to describe, but that like there's an entire different world existing at the same time as yours. And like the best way to think about it is like, if you imagine parallel universes where things are going on, when you travel, the world becomes endlessly big and endlessly fascinating. And like, fast forward, 40 years, and I am an adult, not 40 years, but like 20 years. And I'm an adult, and I've spent a lot of my adult life in Buenos Aires, Argentina for work, but like, over a month to 6 weeks combined. And like, I imagine in my head when I wake up some days that like, oh, the person at the coffee shop is like making that coffee. It's not for me, it's for somebody else. And like, I don't know, to me, travel is this notion of like this ever expanding world, and you get to imagine the simultaneous livelihoods of others in other parts of the world. That was my long answer.
I love that. No, absolutely, man. By the time I was 11, I don't even think I was allowed to stay at be alone in my house, like, I mean, coming home from school.
I had been to Vegas and California and Mexico and Canada for sure, but like not really. I guess when we were very little, when we were still like lap babies, my parents took us a lot of places, but my first memories of travel are probably 10 and up.
So, and specifically like this first big, like kind of defining trip happens weeks before September 11th.
Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, they didn't check security at all this trip.
Right. Like back in the days.
4 tourists on a mud tarmac. Just wait. The next plane will come in 2 hours. Just sit in the plastic lawn chair. Don't worry. Like, my God, I remember thinking, holy shit, this is it. This is how we die in the jungle.
Yeah. You just live
came.
here.
It was fine.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. And then like you didn't get taken.
Also, I found great success on that trip because every single member of my family at one point in that trip got violently ill from some like food thing. And I like magically survived and never got sick.
Amazing. What was like the cuisine that you were enjoying? Any specific memories of food? Because I remember, I'm really trying hard to.
They ate guinea pig in Peru, and we had guinea pig. Does that sound mean? Tastes just like chicken.
Oh, well,
it's a delicacy there. It's like roasted on a spit.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I would say
it's called koi. So you go moi koi, more
interesting.
koi, please.
Yeah, you kind of have to switch things, like Rocky Mountain oysters wouldn't sell.
Yeah.
Quite the same if you just called them balls.
Yeah, I mean, I don't
testicles.
eat seafood. I try not to eat fresh, uncooked vegetables in much of the world.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not safe, right? Unless I peeled it myself or something like that.
Yeah.
And if you stick to that, you're typically going to be fine. Fatal flaws where my brother and my mom ate a salad.
That'll do it.
Big mistake. And my dad ate some kind of like uncooked chicken fish thing, and a lot of it.
Uh-huh.
So, whereas I was like sticking to rice that day for whatever reason. So, you can survive very well if your thing is hot. Like, eat hot, physically hot food, not like spicy hot.
Mm-hmm.
Physically hot food,
temperature.
You're going to be
food,
fine.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah, and the
things you peel yourself.
Exactly, and the idea of like abandoned salad, I think, is something I've always been eager to jump on.
Yeah, or an excuse not to eat green things.
Exactly. And then of course in the era when you could like go right up to the gate with someone if you were taking the flight.
Yeah.
Like just seems so odd to now that was ever a thing that you could do.
Yeah, it totally feels odd now. There was security in fair. I mean, obviously not these mud tarmacs. There were also these like helicopter safety manuals on the wall that I studied. So we know that like helicopters shouldn't hit trees. I'm like, no shit, Sherlock. But in any event, there wasn't as much security. There certainly was. You didn't have to worry about like what you're packing in your bag. I definitely packed idiotically for this trip. I had like multiple pairs of parachute pants and tank tops. And then I bought like a knit hat. I was like straight, and I wore my hair in like not braids, but like those like ponytails that you then tie it multiple times, and it looks kind of like like little bulbs kind of in your pigtails. And I had very long hair.
Right. You sound like you could have been like an extra in like a 90s PSA.
Totally. It was a bucket hat, but like a woven bucket hat. So it was like, I imagine I was like a 90s PSA for those who were like backpacking in South America.
Sure. Yeah.
It was weird. It was, I was never again.
You don't think you'll bring back that style now?
No, I think I'm good.
Oh man, like my fashion around that time, like I didn't develop fashion probably until I met you.
Yeah.
But I was terminally of that era of like we were just thinking about this because we've been watching Yellow Jackets and Pepsi Where's My Jet. That sort of like block color
striped shirt. Yeah.
I
didn't have those.
Striped shirt, and then just kind of like random rectangles and squares, like a red square here, a green stripe here,
and
then
primary colors and neons in the 90s.
Like, yeah, it was like we were just tapering off of like the neon of the 80s, but we weren't ready to let go yet.
Yeah.
So we were kind of like, it was like almost like, I call it like prep flannel, because like grunge had happened. So there was the like lumberjack look going on from the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah.
And then there's this sort of like Lacoste, like,
but like,
sort of take on that.
Picture like the baby tank top, which for girls of my age at that time was like a thing. The Abercrombie and Fitch like baby tank top, parachute pants, and then I had like borrowed like the equivalent of like wellies to go hike in like the Amazon rainforest with my like knit bucket hat. Like conjure that image of like me. I'm super not outdoorsy, really not.
Right.
I'm faking it till I make it because I'm working on a campaign with the outdoorsy people now, and I do have a bike, but like, I'm not your camping girl. And I was like, they were like, you can choose to go on 2 hikes. You can go on a 10-mile hike that's like an all-day thing, or you can go on like a 3-mile, whatever. And I, of course, put my hand up. They're like, we need half and half. So like, you got to like sort this out amongst yourselves. And I'm like, I'm going on the long-ass hike. Man, did I regret it. And man, was I starving by the time lunch came.
I bet.
But that was the Amazon. But yeah, I mean, largely until my late high school years, my parents had only taken us to third world countries where there were high levels of poverty in the places that we stayed because my parents didn't have a ton of money to spend, but like this was the one thing we did every year. It's a family trip to somewhere crazy in South America.
So South America specifically?
Largely South America, yeah.
So had you ever been to Argentina before, like you started going for business?
No.
Oh, interesting.
That was one of the countries I had not been to. But yeah, I mean, they'd taken me to Mexico and Ecuador and Peru and, you know, places that didn't have very much like infrastructure. And then like when I was like 15, they took me to London and I was like, I remember telling my mom, I was like, there's other first world countries? Like, what is that? You've been keeping this from me. And then, of course, I did my research and sort of understood like what first and second and third world really actually mean functionally. It depends which wars they were involved in. It actually means nothing in terms of their infrastructure, which is kind of funny to me.
Or like, you know, gross domestic product or levels of
I mean, Argentina is technically a third world country, which like blows my mind because they're so not a third world country. But
because if you go there, like I remember the first time we went to Buenos Aires, really being taken aback that it felt like a European city.
Yeah.
Like it reminded me of like being in Spain. Almost.
Yeah, but like my parents take us to Guatemala and Belize and like really places that had been decimated, mostly because it was cheap, you know, for a lot of reasons and easy to get to functionally, you know, and we had a great time. We learned a lot and I have a tremendous respect for like people in different life situations than my own. But when I landed in London and everybody spoke English and like I just don't know what I pictured in my head was London. It's really funny. Like I had never dreamed of going to Europe whatsoever. My brother had been. They took him to Paris and London when he was younger. I elected to go to Mexico on that same individual trip. But in any event, you know, so I hadn't been to Europe. And so what I'd conjured up in my mind was like, it's still World War II and there's bombs dropping. And like I arrived
like from your history class.
Yeah, like I had pictured it in black and white and like, I don't know what, but my mother just thought it was like hilarious that like, of course, this child, like my other child's been here, but like this child is like, totally been living in some sort of weird complex about like America's the greatest country in the world that like I taught her. And she felt really shitty about it, which like, you know, the internet came of age with us. I don't think children now who haven't visited other countries would think the same thing. And I certainly wasn't like, you know, egotistical about it, but like this idea that there were other people that lived just as we did.
Yeah. And like
so far away.
Yeah. And like maybe different, but not terribly different. I think we were sort of like on the tail end of that parroting of America's the greatest country in the world. Not saying I don't love it here for anyone who wants to flame me on Twitter. But I definitely think kids nowadays with greater access to information, with that same level of curiosity, are pretty clear to look around and look at the numbers and go, oh no, we're failing totally. But like there's been a drop off.
Yeah, it was this anomaly, and then I spent a good chunk of my like high school years hanging around Europe with the Fringe Festival and other things in my life, Italy, and just like seeing Europe.
The Edinburgh. Because you stage managed a show in Edinburgh when you were
I stage managed, and I was the technical director of like 6 shows one summer too. Yeah, there were 2 summers, but yeah. So like I was I was seeing and living and experiencing places that were first world countries, largely spoke English. Italy didn't, but Croatia, like European countries. And then my mother decides, about a year, 6 months, there's an announcement. Vietnam is opening to U.S. tourists. And my mother, God love her, is like, we're going. And my brother didn't want to come on this trip. But it was magical is an understatement. Best trip of my life, probably hands down in terms of like something so foreign. And I just fell in love with Asia. And I've continued to just go back to Asia a billion times. And I've been to many countries in Asia now, but for lots of different reasons. But like, imagine a country that your parents who grew up in the 60s is like, this is a country that we've like bombed to shit and we're terrible people for it. And like my generation sucks because of the Vietnam War. Like you're constantly hearing like Vietnam and Agent Orange and like we've murdered a bunch of people. And then your mother, when you're like 17 years old, is like, let's go. And you're like, holy shit.
There's a lot of cognitive
It was
dissonance.
The first time I had to go to a consulate to like do a visa interview. I was terrified.
And this is like Absolutely. And this is Vietnam, like when there's zero Western influence.
2005.
So wow,
It
that's
had
when
just
that's when it
opened.
opened. So it was closed for like what, 50, like
Yeah,
40
I mean, I'm sure there were
years?
some tourists who could go, but like it was
Mhm.
the first time there was like an announcement about it opening, like I guess fundamentally as like a place that people could travel to
Right.
functionally.
Mhm.
It's not that like you couldn't have gone there before, maybe, but like
Yeah.
this was like I don't remember if it was like like a bridge of diplomacy or something, like a U.S. consulate
Mhm.
open there. There was something that happened in 2004, 2005, because we went in 2005, that functionally opened it
I
to the
see.
Western world. And it was an announcement, and she was like, let's go. And my brother didn't want to go, God bless him, but like the three of us filed all of this very rigorous paperwork, every country we'd ever been to, like it was an inordinate amount of processing paperwork. We only to then not be given our visas before leaving the United States, to be told that our visas were like being held up you're supposed to get them before you leave the United States to prove that you can go in the country, but they were like, you'll receive them upon arrival. And it had to do with the fact that my mother had just very recently been to China for work.
Right. Yeah.
And like we didn't know that was a thing. So my dad and I zoomed through at like 2 a.m. in Hanoi after like traveling to Korea, transferring planes, getting on like Air Vietnam to land in Hanoi at like 2 or 3 a.m. It's pitch black. No one's at the airport. We are the only Western tourists in this airport at this hour. And my mother is like detained effectively for hours. It felt like hours. I have no idea how long it was. And they were questioning her about her trip to China and what was she doing there and all that. And my dad and I are just like sitting with these suitcases at like baggage claim in this desolate, empty airport. I'm starving because I ate like, I don't know, bibimbap tofu supreme in the Korean airport.
Sure.
He's got to be starving too because like he doesn't eat any of that stuff. And we're just like, maybe she comes out. She has like all of our passports. She has like everything.
Right.
Her.
It's like hopefully she comes out, lest you end up like Tom Hanks in The Terminal.
Yeah, and eventually she comes out, and we take this like very long pitch black ride in the dark jungle to downtown Hanoi. I mean, it felt like a 3-hour drive. It was still very dark out when we get to this hotel, and then we arrive at this beautiful metropole, fancy ass hotel. And we'd just been through a war and like passed out, and then went on this adventure for like a month in Vietnam and saw functionally the entire country, top to bottom. Took an overnight train to Sapa, saw Ha Long Bay. Anyway, I'm just raveling now around different trips. But
that's what I wanted for this podcast.
Oh, okay.
So you're doing good. I appreciate. Well, because I have no concept of Vietnam, and like my dad, like every country we go to, he's like, oh, they're still mad about the war.
Yeah, they're not in Vietnam. In fact, our first tour guide, which was a northern tour guide, was I asked him. I was young. I was very young. I was 17. 104 degrees. You're delirious. I was like, so I got to ask you, like, hi, I'm here. And I was very self-aware at this point in my life too, of like, different people's circumstances. And my parents had stepped away, maybe gone to the bathroom, whatever. And
Sure.
I was like, I'm very aware that like generationally, there's probably some anger towards my parents, but like you and I seem to be chill. And he was young too. He's probably in his mid-20s. He had a little baby boy, and he was like, no, we make a very clear distinction here between our anger toward the government and our appreciation for a people. And in very clear English to me. And I was like, that is a great concept. I'm here for it.
Yeah, that's absolutely a fundamental understanding that's really makes the world make a lot more sense to me, is that people are not their government.
Right. And we were seeing it was a state sponsored ish tour, right?
Sure.
Still. And we were seeing some very clear anti-American, I wouldn't call it propaganda, but just anti-American sentiment, maybe is the right word, very real and factual in many museums, in many places, and seeing what we did to this country in a very real way that just made your heart break. And although I had like no at all responsibility for that, I wasn't even born yet, you saw it. And you saw a generation of people who were still trying to rebound. I mean, this is a guy who also wasn't born during this era, so I could relate to him, and who like coveted my headphones because like Sony headphones, like there was no way you could get Sony headphones in Vietnam. And I remember sending him a pair later, and he did get them. But
oh, that's really nice of you.
Just like the little things like that. McDonald's was not there. Coca-Cola was not there yet.
What was there to drink? Was there like a local soda?
water. I remember drinking gallons of water. It was so hot.
Uh-huh.
There might have been juices and things. I don't remember soda so much. Like,
Mm-hmm.
unlike Inca Cola in Peru, like there's nothing that
Yeah.
conjures up a memory for me
Yeah.
there.
Or Tums Up in India.
Yeah. There definitely were like local beers and things like that my parents drank and enjoyed, but like I think I just carried around like a gallon of water.
Well,
everywhere
yeah,
I went.
because that subtropical heat, like
Oh.
that Southeast Asian heat, is like a level of hot that you don't understand. Like, quite frankly, I was thinking about this, like on our last big trip through Asia, when we got to Bangkok, and there was parts where we were just kind of walking
Yeah.
through the city. Because I historically don't do well in heat if I get dehydrated.
Yeah.
Like, I've almost like fainted in line at Six Flags and then
Mhm.
still gotten on the roller coaster. So I was just kind of like, I was trying to like think about living there all the time. Like, I could definitely see like any place, you kind of adapt to it. And then of course like having to adapt to like Southeast Asian plumbing, for example, or what have you.
So
But
Vietnam and Thailand, to an extent, have sort of shifted their hours accordingly. Like, I don't know if you noticed this in Thailand so much, but in Vietnam is definitely present. Like, other than people who are going to office jobs, like the hard labor seems to be done when it's dark out.
Mhm.
And what you would see is like families riding around on motorbikes together in the evening just to keep cool, to keep the wind in their faces.
right, yeah.
So like you'll see families at like 9, 10 o'clock at night just driving around on motorbikes to cool off before bed, basically. But yeah, they hate the sun. They fully cover their arms, and I got like smacked by an old Vietnamese
Right, you told me this
woman.
because they like there's, I guess, some sort of like, you're an aristocrat if your skin is light, like you
Yeah.
haven't been out working in the fields.
Right, in the rice fields. So, a lot of people wear these like, arm length gloves like
Mhm.
you're in, I don't know, like
And of course, like, yeah, and
a
of course, like the
Russian
big
czar.
hat, yeah.
Big hat. They wore masks to cover their faces, not because of COVID, to like
Mhm.
keep their faces light, and big sunglasses and full clothes, long sleeves and long pants. And yeah, I was probably wearing a tank top or something, and this old Vietnamese woman came up and like just smacked me out of nowhere, like I was in like Scooby Doo or something. Not Scooby Doo, but like the Looney Tunes, where you just
Three
get like,
Stooges.
you just get like, wow, and you just spin around a couple times.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, holy shit. My mom was like really upset. And then the guide that was with us, because we had to have a guide with us 24/7 in Vietnam at the time.
Sure.
He was just like, oh, I'm so sorry. It's because like, her skin's so light and she has blonde hair. Like, there were many people who like would pet my hair. Like,
Mhm.
they'd never seen a blonde woman before. And similar thing happened to you in India with the tall and me and with
Yeah.
the blonde hair in India too.
Yeah.
But like,
Yeah,
people
like
just
people
hand me their babies and take pictures with them.
Yeah, and people just want to take pictures next to me because, like,
Yeah.
oh my God, I've never seen someone so tall. I really felt for that guy in Shanghai.
Oh, he was
Uh,
taller than you.
Yeah, he was easily like 7'2".
And he was getting like accosted by people.
Yeah, I really I empathize with that because like it's one thing to like it's one thing to like, oh wow, you're really tall. Can we get a picture? That's
You
fine.
love it. Don't even pretend.
That's fine to me. Yes, I kind of like feel like a little bit of a celebrity. I'm also an attention whore. Uh, but to get gawked at like you're a circus, like you're a circus
Yeah, that's
freak
not good.
is it that feels dehumanizing.
Yeah. So
So Vietnam was kind of like, that was sort of like your again, similar to the Peru, that was sort of like your gateway to like Southeast Asia being amazing.
oh yeah, and I'm obsessed with it. You and I have
Yes.
been since multiple times. I know I've other than that Vietnam trip, I've only been back with you. And we've been to what,
Mhm.
9 countries, 8 countries, and Tokyo twice. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm obsessed.
Yeah, as am I. Like, as soon as I like really started like connecting, because my brain was like, well, let me do the easy stuff first, which is all the European. Let's
No, it's
start
expensive
closest,
and boring. Yeah.
start closest, and then work my
no.
way out. But no, like Asia just really blew my mind. Not just for it feeling different from what my usual
Mm-hmm.
day-to-day life is, even in New York, but I don't. I'm really trying to understand how people like get like find happiness in the other countries they live in, because I feel like the rest of the world has found a way to like live and feel like a certain level of joy constantly that I don't feel most Americans have. And everyone is
Yeah.
so like incredibly nice and patient and willing to wanting to help you if you need it. Like
Yeah, I think there is this, it depends on which country, but I think overwhelmingly to countries that have fewer Western tourists, like fewer American and Canadian tourists
mhm,
than, say, Australia and Russia. I'd say most of Southeast Asia predominantly has Australian and Russian tourists.
mhm,
And so to get Americans and Canadians really outside the major hubs, like I'm talking outside of Hong Kong, outside of Tokyo, obviously the major cities in Southeast Asia, there's like the white backpacker. But I think to get like tourists is a big deal. And so there is a desire. It's a massive industry for them. It was decimated in the pandemic. Like I'll be very interested to go back and see how it's changed. But
mhm.
I think, there is an incentive and a desire to want you to have the best experience possible to generate more tourism, to generate more expensive tourism too.
Sure. Yeah.
Like not the hostile backpacker type, who's going to spur their economy and spur their infrastructure. And certainly in Taiwan, it was as though like people had never seen Americans. It was kind of crazy given our
Yeah.
relationship with the country. It's one China, one China, one China. Never mind.
Right. No,
The country, the
yeah.
autonomous country of Taiwan.
Right.
I said it.
Exactly. The independent nation of Taiwan. Who's
One China.
oh man, I would love for this to be the podcast that really gets me in trouble.
Oh man.
But no, I know exactly what you're saying.
The
Like
island
it's
nation
almost
off
like
of China.
yeah.
The
Well,
Chinese nation off of China.
Yeah.
China Island. I don't know. I don't want to get us in trouble.
Well, it's an entirely different way of thinking compared to whereas I feel like most the loudest Americans are always like, "Go away, get out of here, you don't belong here," which
Yeah.
compared and they don't really care about the reputation of
No.
how we appear.
No, there's a
I'm
great
very conscious on like I
Yeah.
want everyone to be like, well, I don't like what the U.S. government is doing, but that tall guy and that blonde lady were nice.
Yeah, I mean I feel like every country I've been to with you where we've met like local people, there's been this sense of like wanting a great national pride on behalf of the host to like show you their country and to show you how incredible it is for whatever reason. Like I think of how much time we spent in Buenos Aires. Like I feel like I understand that lifestyle. I've
Yes.
never lived it for very long. I'm not going to say I'm a porteña, but I feel like I understand this culture and society in a way that like I wouldn't have had I not had like a local host.
Sure.
Similarly to like when we've been in parts of the world where you've had friends who've shown us what that life is like France.
Mm-hmm.
We went to Paris and we met people and got to know them and spent time with them and like really understood like the struggle of the expat in Paris,
Yeah, yeah.
like I feel like I understand that story now.
Totally, yeah.
In a way that I might not have.
Mm-hmm.
Same with England. We met Barry, our friend Barry in Liverpool, like
Mm-hmm.
got to see a slice of his life. I think he's a great musician. You should look him up, Barry
Yes.
Briarcliff.
Yeah, been on the show. Great guy. We
Right.
got his album right on the desk here.
But in any event, like I think that's like the best part of travel, and to do it in a not artificial way too. I think there's lots of tour groups that are like, you'll go to a local person's home. Like that's not the way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
The way to do it is to like really find somebody who lives there and befriend them in some way, shape, or form. And we've been able to do that through the fact that you've tried to get comedy shows in a lot of these countries. And so
Mhm.
like, and as much as I begrudgingly get mad when we miss a dinner that I wanted to go do this comedy in whatever,
Sorry.
no, we've gotten to like know the lifestyle, and that's been
Mhm.
cool in a different way.
Yeah. I agree. Absolutely. Like you learn about it. And again, like it's like you really like are getting a sense of like what it's like to be in somebody else's shoes.
Yeah. And the culture. There are very big cultural differences in this world that we as Americans don't understand or appreciate or care to. And I feel like I've gotten to know what those are. Just,
Uh-huh.
to have a 7-year-old girl in Argentina articulate to you that she knows that she has more rights in her country than in yours when it comes to abortion
Oh my God.
blew my mind, and will till the day I have a child and tell them like
Mm-hmm.
people in other countries have more rights than you.
Yeah,
It blew
exactly.
my mind. And 7 years old could articulate that and feel empathy for it.
Yeah, which is pretty amazing. And because they start learning how to protest in Argentina
Very
early,
young. Yeah.
yeah, she could help you like get the next march started.
And then also very innocently know that my Independence Day was coming up and like wanted to know how to draw my flag. Like that trifecta of things is incredible. And that's an experience I'll never get to replicate anywhere else in the world. I mean, maybe, but like,
Yeah.
that's or when we've gone to Canada with our friends, we've really come to understand and learn and appreciate the culture. And, we don't, as Americans, appreciate Canada as a foreign country in the same way as we should. It is.
Right.
It's a very different place culturally, and
Very much so.
it should be celebrated in its own right. But
I agree. And one of my favorite moments is like, because I wear band shirts a lot when we travel, or like Star Wars, like, and I have those little like, or sports like soccer, of course,
Sure.
is the world's game. Like, and I have those like I still remember when I was wearing like a Blink-182 shirt in Jaipur, and somebody working at the hotel is like, "I love your shirt. I love
Yeah.
I love that band." I was like, "They have a new album." He's like, "Really? Yeah, it looks like this." Like it's like this kind of like universal understanding
sure.
that's really like, yeah, we live differently, and then but we're also not so different. And I've heard you talk about this a lot too. What do most people want in most places of the world?
Yeah, I mean, they want to provide for their families, and they want to feel like they're contributing to the future and the betterment of the world. And if we all just relate to each other on that level, we're all going to be just fine. And that includes folks like your parents who share different political values than me, and it includes folks in the Middle East who share different religious values than me. I spent a lot of time in Turkey, a lot of time in Egypt, and in other parts of the Middle East, Dubai, and there's more I want to see and do. I really want to go to Jordan, but the Muslim culture is an often feared, needlessly and inappropriately feared culture, but one that should be, sought and understanding. And I think the more that you talk to folks from those countries who practice, Islam, who are, have those cultural, norms that are different than ours, and where you understand them and you sort of grow to appreciate them in a different way. And I think my time in Turkey certainly was eye-opening to that.
Yeah, Turkey, that is still like one of the stories that I like really think back on, as far as like how many, no way I was ever going to have that experience other than if I had met you, dear.
Yeah, I totally forgot that you and I had been to Turkey together. How terrible is that?
I
spent quite a bit of time in Turkey on my own, I guess.
I think about it because I love to tell comedians about bombing in a foreign language.
Yeah, it's great. It's really, the silence is extra deafening.
Yeah, like, but again, like after that, no Friday Late Show can rustle me. Even if like I still got to like start working the rust off.
Does it also like make you feel stronger because you had to like walk through bloodstained streets to get there to perform the illegal art of comedy in Istanbul?
Yes. That's another part of that, being like a defiant art criminal for
it's
art
a political
for
choice, right? And you've had him on the podcast. You talked to Coy and had a conversation with him about it's art as a political stance, and that's something that we in the United States certainly take for granted.
Absolutely, even if the art itself is not inherently political, just doing it, is a political statement.
Right, the act of performing, the act of having shows, the act of taking the risk to promote the shows, is all a political act. And their lives are just different than ours. But I love the Middle East. I do, and I, may not agree with them culturally on the status of women, but I do respect some of the cultural traditions and understandings of, in restaurants, women should eat upstairs and shouldn't be gawked at in windows. And some might see that as offensive. I see that as safety. And I'm not Muslim, I'm Jewish, right? So
right.
I think when you really get to understand that some of these choices are less about demeaning women and are more about maybe traditional norms of safety, you can choose to accept them or not, but you at least understand where they're coming from, and that's a better place to be viewing the world from than not.
I think so, because it's coming from a greater place of like empathy and understanding, as opposed to like a general sort of dispersion of or casting away of
Yeah.
of just like you're wrong, so everything you believe is wrong, and you're a bad person.
Yeah.
Which we do a lot of nowadays, that I find very exhausting. Would love to let's in the last couple of minutes here, because I've loved that we've gotten to talk about this. Maybe we should do some bucket list kind of ideas of what we would want to see.
Yeah, I could tell you. It was funny. I told my dad, I was like, my bucket list is short yesterday. And he was like, what? Like, he seemed surprised by that. But I think he forgets how much of the world I've seen.
Of course.
So bucket list for me, I really want to see Petra and Jordan. That's
Uh-huh.
been high on my list for a long time, as well as Oman, the
Mhm.
country. I do want to see the Kremlin in Russia. And I know that's a controversial thing, but I want to see the candy buildings. I do. I don't,
Uh-huh.
there's not much else in Russia I want to see. They have these like, they look like gumdrop kind of buildings.
Yeah, I saw Anastasia.
Yeah, I just want to see them. I think that's cool. I would like to go as much of the length of the Great Wall of China as the world will permit me.
Mm-hmm.
And I really want to go on an African safari in Kenya and beyond. Those are like my top 5 dreams and goals at this point, and I think are totally attainable. I also want to move to Southeast Asia and live there when I retire.
right. Just would you sell candies with Thai, or would you rent jet skis?
I don't know. I probably would I don't know. I assume if I could afford it, I would just not work. But I might
Sure.
have some sort of food stall or assisted a food stall just for, a purpose.
Ooh, there you go. Oh, it could be amazing.
What?
Like, what if you had like a latke and brisket stall?
No.
And because you have all of this like local like Thai cuisine, because we've talked about Thailand, so you're like next to the oyster omelet lady, and you're just frying up some latkes with some applesauce. I mean, how many people in that I guarantee I'm not I
but
don't
they're made with like taro root.
Right. Well, I don't know off the top of my head what the Jewish population in Thailand is, but I'm guessing it's
pork brisket.
I'm guessing it's minimal.
Yeah, no, I think I would try to. I would try to befriend and become ingrained in the culture in some way, and I would work for minimum wage just for the experience of and trying to support a local family, and maybe if I take less wages, they make more money, and I don't know. I would see what that life was about.
Yeah. I hope to still be doing this podcast well into like my 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
And then just I want to interview the new generation of comedians in whatever country we happen to be in.
Yeah, I'd love to get up at 4 a.m. and go to the fruit and vegetable stand and get our basics, and then every night we just go to the night market for dinner, because why cook in these countries when you have ample, very inexpensive and delicious and amazing food at your footsteps.
Exactly, which is why I'm very excited because Queens market season will be
what's on your bucket list. Sorry to interrupt you. Yeah, Queens Market is opening on your birthday.
Well, my number one bucket list idea is I want to do stand up on every continent. So
I know, but what do you want to see and do? Putting that aside.
What do I specifically
Putting performing for the Penguins in Antarctica aside.
Right. That's a really, really good question. I feel like a big part of me was I would love to see and experience as much of Japan as possible. Same way that you got to see all of Vietnam, I would love to do that for Japan. That's probably number one. And then outside of the Great Wall of China, that ice sculpture festival that happens China. that and this is gonna sound really lame, but the only reason I found out about this huge ice sculpture festival that happens in this city near Siberia in China is because of the Reflections of China short film that they play at Epcot
in Disney.
At Disney.
Hey, we're gonna go someday.
Yeah,
I guess I didn't think about colder places. I would like to go to Patagonia. I would like to see Iceland.
Oh yeah, Iceland is up there. That's very attainable. And I know you want to go to, was it Myanmar, where the bioluminescent plankton?
No, that's not Myanmar. That is in those are islands in the Maldives.
That's it, Maldives.
Which are off the coast of India.
Yeah. So I know you want to do that too.
I would like to go to Myanmar, but I'd like to make sure that I can leave Myanmar alive first.
Of course. And then
they've had a very politically charged instability for a while.
Yeah. And then I know you want to say, basically, if I could just anything you want to do, I want to do because I genuinely enjoy traveling with you, dear.
Yeah. I mean, I get that. I do. I want to see the African animals. I do, like the big five, as they call them. But
Yeah, I really want to, as unrecommended as it is, there's a part of me that just really wants to pet a big predatory cat.
That sounds like a terrible idea.
I mean, it does, but I keep seeing all these animal experts on YouTube like snuggling with lionesses.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like in my dream world, I'd like to die and say I visited every country in the world, even if it was for a moment. But I think the reality of that is low for lots of reasons that have, not less to do with desire than anything else, but also politics.
Sure.
But, I think I would like to go to every like UN registered country in the world at some point in my life. And frankly, I've barely made a dent in Africa. I've been to Morocco, I've been to Egypt, I've been to Ghana, I've been to Nigeria. And to me, given how the breadth and depth of that continent feels shameful, but at the same time, I've only been to a handful of countries in Europe, so like,
Yeah.
And I really want to go to Uzbekistan. I want to see the giant mosques across Uzbekistan. It is a dream of mine. They are beautiful buildings, and I want to see it. I want to see the Silk Road.
Well, dear, that's something that we're definitely going to do, and I can't wait to do it with you.
Yeah, I know. My dad's like, Uzbekistan? Really? That was on your top 5?
Yeah, well, and again...
I love my dad. He's so practical and pragmatic, and then he's like, I'm going to Singapore tomorrow.
Right.
You're like, okay, Dad.
And my brilliant T-shirt idea, I stand for the stands.
It's a choice.
You know. I mean, I wouldn't wear it there, but it'd be an internet thing.
Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan. What are the other stands?
Turkmenistan.
Turkmenistan, yeah, that's on my list too. That's part of the Silk Road. Yeah.
Yeah, that's got
for
kind of an authoritarian
Armenia.
thing. Ooh, yeah, Armenia.
Iran has been high on my list for a long time. Now it's probably not the moment for me.
Someday.
My parents said, there were times in their lifetime when certain countries were off limits that they went to later in life. And so, I'm just hoping everybody gets their shit together and allows me to see their beautiful country. And
exactly.
I promise I will cause no trouble.
Mm-hmm.
I will cause debates about street food for sure. But
of course. Well, that's the best kind of debate to have, dear.
So where are we going next? Should we go book a ticket?
Well, let's. I
we
think
got plans. We're going back to California. You're going to Ireland. I'm going to Dominican Republic with my mom. Hopefully, one of us survives it. And split trip, boys trip, girls trip.
Yeah, and we got some plans.
The worst decision of our lives, but it's gonna be fine.
Well, where we go next will probably be a conversation for later, but it'll be great. And anything we can plug before we get out here, dear?
Visit Vietnam. No, I'm just kidding. This podcast has been sponsored by Visit Turkmenistan.
I would love to get some Turkmenistan sponsorship.
No, I have nothing to plug. I think just get out there. The pandemic is waning and countries need our tourism dollars and our tourism experiences. And I think we all need it as a society to get back out there. So Will and I are going to be putting our masks in a closet soon, as soon as I get around to it, because I'm just tired of staring at them. And, be safe, but go out there and see the world.
Yeah. And go out and have some new experiences and be joyful. That's
Where
my new
in the
thing.
World is Carmen Sandiego?
Well, now I gotta pay money for that. No, I'm kidding.
Oh,
just
really?
kidding.
I sang it. Though.
No, I was playing.
Okay, cool. What other songs we should sing?
Well, there's always the la 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 from our other podcast.
No, Will's like, no singing on this podcast. Well, go out there, sing some other country's national anthem. Oh, Canada. Just kidding. We're gonna land the plane now.
Thanks
Bye.
for doing this, dear.
Anytime.
Okay, folks, that's our show for today. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate you tuning in. If you enjoyed this and think you know a friend who would be interested in listening to this podcast as well, you can send them to awesomedisaster.com. It's got links to everywhere you can get the show. We are on Apple, Stitcher, and Spotify. If you want to give us a subscribe, share some episode links, those all help. Please are algorithmic overlords. And you can follow me on Twitter at ComicWillCarry, at WillCarry23 on Instagram. And you can find links to those at awesomedisaster.com as well. If you want to go a little bit further in your support of the show, we do have a merch store as well as a Patreon. patreon.com/awesomedisaster. You can get access to a lot of exclusive content I do not post anywhere else. And again, everything is at awesomedisaster.com. And since we're talking about travel a lot on today's show, I would love to hear from you guys if you have any specific bucket list trips or favorite travel memories. It does not have to be international. From some of the stories you've heard my wife Cheslea talk about on the show today, if you went to Disney as a kid like I did recently as an adult, and that's a cherished family memory, I would love to hear about it. Or if you went to the Grand Canyon, I want to know what really like opens your mind, what helped you see things different. So feel free to send me a message with that story at my website, again, awesomedisaster.com. You can use the contact form and you can send me an email right from there. And I will see you all next time between Awesome and Disaster. Stay safe, wear a mask, get vaccine boosted, and stomp out fascism. Take care, everybody.